everybody, it's me, Laura, and today we're going to create my picture, Aliens on Planet Eyeball. Yes, so this piece is like a 13 by, like 10.5 inch frame, but the actual picture piece itself is more like a 7 by 9. So right here, I'm bringing in my scrap clay, and that's what we're starting out with. I want to say I rolled this out on a number 4 setting in my pasta machine. So it was fairly thin, but not too thin. And I want to get this so that when I rolled this out or, put it through the pasta machine, I used a 180 Atlas, so it's a little bit wider. And I tried to stretch this a little bit, as you can tell, to try and get this to cover all my lines on my board. Now right here, I'm cutting one side, and you'll kind of notice this blade is kind of long. I found an 8-inch blade, and I loved it. I thought, oh yay, it's very stiff, but it works great, especially for creating a straight line I need to have all the way down, and especially in these boards. It makes perfect sense. So right here, I'm just kind of getting that kind of defined up, that scrap clay, and then we'll start to cover this and create more and more of our background. Okay, so now I've rolled out some dark blue clay, and I'm placing this right over the top of the scrap. And I want to say this was also rolled out on my pasta machine on a number 4 setting. I'm going around and I'm just quickly kind of giving myself that edge that I really like on this. And this is a fairly dark blue. You could go darker than this, but I needed to have a blue that was going to be kind of right in between. I mean, it's going to bake up and it's going to go darker. So keep that in mind when you go ahead and create this background. If you're going to use a blue, I like a medium to dark type blue when you're creating it. And then, of course, I'm just cutting right along that edge. So this way, then I get a nice clean line. And, of course, this blue kind of goes right over this edge. The reason why I put that down that scrap clay, and just remember this, is so that scrap clay, I always kind of put down the scrap because I try to ward off the idea of cracking in my picture piece. And so in this regard, I feel like I'm kind of doing that because the blue is going down. It's fairly light. It's not really completely adhered down to the actual board. So I feel like it will have a little bit of room to breathe. So that's why I put down that scrap clay, and then I put down the official background to it. All right, now I've brought in some white clay here, and I've rolled this out on a number 4 setting on my pasta machine. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm just creating this block, this large block. I'm bringing in my ball tools, and we're just going to start dotting up all of this white clay. So I'm going to use some of my big ones, and I'm just kind of rolling them around like you could kind of see there. I'm just making impressions into the clay, big, small, little. It just totally, this is why I have all of my ball tools here, because I figure I need a little bit of everything. And I kind of put some of them really close together and some really far apart. Now that I've dotted this up really well, I'm bringing in my X-Acto knife and I'm just going to create like a half moon shape of this piece of clay. I'm going to rip up the excess and then I'll use my blade to kind of come up underneath this eventually and take up this moon-like shape. Now that I have my moon piece, I'm going to take that and I'm going to bring my picture back in again and I'm going to place this on the left corner area. And, notice right here, I really didn't, I just made a half moon. I didn't care what the, just so long as I got kind of a general idea of a half moon shape. I wasn't very accurate, and that's okay because the clay stretches a little bit. You can bring it in. It's going to go right over the one edge, and then I'm going to conform this to the rest of my picture piece. So really, it's going to look like a bit of a moon coming in that's really close up to the planet. Okay, so now I'm bringing in a section of black clay. Again, it was rolled out on a number 4 setting on my pasta machine. I'm just going to lay that down flat and I'm just going to create kind of like a mountainy, wavy line right across there. And once I do that, this kind of gives me, and I did a dip, and you'll notice this dip becomes very important later, but I'm placing this down right over the top of where that moon is kind of coming up behind that mountain scene. And then I'm just going to pull that black down just a little bit. I've got some dirt on the bottom here, no big deal. I'll just bring in my blade and eventually we're going to go ahead and cut this off as well. Now you would think that, okay, this looks finalized up, I've got my scape, but there's one little element I really wanted to add in, and that was a bit of a foreground. Now my foreground, I mean, this is very animated in a lot of ways. It's not terribly, this is cartoonish. Think cartoony. And I'm just cutting a piece of silver clay, or gray, if you will. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut a nice straight line. I'm going to take this piece eventually, I'm going to get a little bit more. Let's go ahead and make it more decisive, get a nice straight line on both sides. And then once I have this, we're going to take this up with my blade and we're going to place this down on my picture as well. Now, I'm doing this because I want to go ahead and create kind of a foreground that I can play with on my picture piece. So this will go right down at the bottom, and I'm going to overlap this right over at the bottom where the black kind of ends. And I will then again take your blade and cut it precisely to the picture piece. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and take some tinfoil and create the body of our alien compendium. And that's what I've been calling this little guy. I hope you guys don't mind. It's kind of just a fun little thing. I thought we'll just go ahead and bring in some 22 gauge silver wire, and we'll have some tinfoil. And this tinfoil is eventually going to turn into like a little peaked house. I want to say the little house is going to be about a half an inch deep. You know, you could go 3/4 of an inch, but anytime you get close to 3/4 or an inch off the surface on your little item here, it gets kind of bulky, and I didn't want it quite that bulky. So try to make this little house piece, and that's what's going to turn into kind of a little house thing. And it's going to be about a half of an inch, you know, deep or thick. And then I want to say, if you can keep it under 3 inches tall, that would be nice too. I had made this little creature actually 3 times over. And my first time was perfect, but he didn't have the right kind of colored wire. I had done it with black instead. And the more I looked at my picture, because it was so dark, I thought, no, I really should have had silver wire in there instead of black wire. With this all being said, the thing was I used my third version of this little guy, and he wound up being about 4.5 inches tall. I mean, with the wire and everything, and that's pretty big. So with that being said, come up with your own little version and do your own height, dependent upon what you like best. Okay, so as you can tell here, this is at least 3 inches tall and then 3/4 of an inch thick. So, you know, it wasn't a half inch, but you know, you try. Anyways, I'm covering this with my scrap clay. The scrap clay was, again, I want to say, you know, it was like thinned out to a number 4 setting on my Atlas pasta machine. And again, I'm just taking my scissors here and I'm just kind of conforming it around the form. All I really need is the front side. So if you don't have enough clay to finish off on the back side, that's all right, because that part is going to be glued down and put onto your picture piece. You just want to make sure you have the other 3 sides all covered and ready to go. Okay, so right here, this is the front side of my little eyeball compendium, and there was a divot on the front. And you know, when you're forming up tinfoil, this sometimes happens. So what am I going to do? I'm going to add in more scrap clay and fill in that divot. I'm using my burnisher here just to kind of make all the little, you know, where there's no actual line showing. So I'm trying to make this more uniform, more smoothed out. And, you know, I'm using a burnisher here, but you could use knitting needles. It's totally up to you. But I wanted this to be more level because we're going to add in more stuff on the front part. Now, I did this on the front, and I like to have my sides that way. The back side, it doesn't matter. Back side, you can leave a little bit of tinfoil showing because that's not going to be showing. You're going to have that up against your picture background piece. So right here, I'm taking some more clay. I rolled this out again on a number 4. I'm just cutting like I call my first little strap, and I'm just laying that down right over the top, and I'm just pulling off the back there, you know, so it just kind of comes off nice and flush, and I don't have any extra clay. And then we're just going to add some more features using some of this scrap clay. Okay, now I'm going to mention here a little something about creating this little form or this little creature. I really love being able to, when I did this little creature, I didn't draw him out ahead of time. I just sat down and I created. And I took a little bit of a ball here, I flattened it out. I thought this would be a nice eyeball feature I could go ahead and put right in the center. And then I'm going to add in like a little bit of like an eyebrow or an eyelid thing going around this eyeball. So this is where I really had fun. Mind you, if you're going to go ahead and try and recreate my little picture here, by all means do so, but explore. I really encourage all of you to explore what you can do with your hands when you're just creating for the sake of it, for the heck of it, when you're just creating a creature of any kind. It doesn't have to be, made in a book. It doesn't have to be a fairy or a dragon or anything like that that is kind of like in our known universe. Make something that's totally in your imagination that maybe nobody has ever thought of. Now I've brought in my needle tool here and I'm poking some holes in my little form, and I did one on the top as well. This is to make a placement for my wire when I put it in. Now I know other people like to go ahead and start with the wire form. I thought I don't really need that. This is on a picture piece, so it doesn't need a lot of support. It doesn't need a lot of extra buildup. So in this regard, I just created my little holes. I'm taking more little balls and I'm just kind of covering over the bottom area where I had stuck and created those holes. This way then it's another little feature and it covers up where I had actually indented, because we want to try and hide those little holes where the wire will eventually be coming out of. Okay, so I created another little strap piece and I wanted to give some emphasis to the sides of this little compendium. And when I did so, I really love steampunk. I really love that sort of thing. And so I thought, well, maybe I could create like a little ribbing or something right around the sides of the compendium. And so I brought in my needle tool and I just created a line feature on this, and it added just enough detail to make it just a little bit more interesting from the sides. All right, so now we're bringing in the paint, and I've got some black paint here. This is plain, just regular acrylic paint. I need to color the background of this thing. Now, just so I'm clear, this piece has already been baked up. So I did this at like 275 for about 7 to 10 minutes. Not real long, but enough to make sure it's all hard. Now, when you go from there, if you look at, I want to say, miniaturists, especially those who like to play in Warhammer and other games like that, they deal with really tiny little pieces, and generally what they'll do is they'll prime their piece with black paint. Well, I'm doing the same thing here. I'm priming this piece with black paint, and part of it was just, I don't want it to be brown that comes through, and black is my line. Just like I would in caning, I want to make sure that black becomes a line, especially when I start to add in the color. Now I'm adding in a color shift paint here. I started out with this paint and I thought I'm going to try it out and see how it looks. Okay, so the more and more I painted with that color shift paint, which wound up being like a blue violet flash, and it was made by Folk Art, I really didn't like it as much. That being said, I kept part of it. I came back in with this, and this is where it really determined. I started doing in my berry metallic, and I liked that, but I really didn't like the overall background of this piece. So I decided to change it up, and I went more with my Deco Art metallic purple, which is an amethyst, and I really liked that piece so much better because it was more of a true purple. It also had that metallic feature to it, and I just felt like the color shift paint here was too goldish, if you will. I wanted more of a purple. I wanted more of kind of an alien color. I mean, gold is metallic, but it's, to me it doesn't really just scream alien quite so much. Purple screams alien to me. This piece was already baked, but as I was going along, I noticed that I wanted to add one more little feature. And I'm taking some fresh black clay here, and I thought, let's just go ahead and add in one more line or feature to my little compendium. And you can do that. Even if you do the acrylic paint and you're like, oh no, I can't, no, you can bake it again even after you apply the acrylic paint. And that's what I do. I'm like going, okay, I need to add in another feature, let's do it, even with the acrylic paint on. I've never had any problems with that. So if you feel like, oh no, I probably should have add it in, bake it, and then move on from there. Okay, so you're going to see where I have a little glimpse here of placing my little compendium against my background, and that really determined for me why I wanted to change up the background color on my little guy here. So this is where I brought in my metallic paint, and I really truly loved it so much more. Okay, so here I'm going to bring in my silver acrylic paint, and we're just going to go ahead and quickly just put little dots on those stones that I placed on the compendium in the first place. This will distinguish this up, and it'll give it kind of a fun, neat feature. Okay, so I'm bringing in my white acrylic paint, and we're just going to go ahead and create that center eyeball. And I do not paint the entire, I've got black in the background there. I leave that black. I create a nice rounded circular piece of white in the center there, but I don't take it all the way to the edge. Partly because I'm going to run into that eyelid area, and I don't want to do that. I also want to create a little bit of a differential between the eyelid or eyebrow area, whatever you call it, to that the original eye in the center, and that way then it gives it a nice, distinctualizes it. You got your eyelid, and then you got your eyeball, and it just kind of offsets it really nicely. the thing is, this guy is not done. He needs a couple more eyeballs. So I created a couple of balls. I'm just pressing them down just a little bit flat on the surface of my baking tile. And then I'm bringing in my Kemper cutters, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a circular form right in the center of each of these. And this way then I'll go ahead and form this onto my little creature, and then we'll bake it. So I went ahead and I baked these little eyeballs already, and now we're just going to go ahead. I'm going to use my green, but I'm going to put black first. I like to have that black down on the very bottom. This way, like I said, if any kind of color shows through, the black is a really nice way of being able to show line. And on the outside edge, I'm going to go with my metallic green, and then the center, of course, will be my white, and then of course my black eyeball. And I do get a little messy here. If you don't want to have your hands get all done up with black acrylic paint, go ahead and use some, just latex gloves or something when you go to paint these. Now that we have our eyeballs finished, I'm bringing in my 22 gauge silver wire and I'm sticking it right back into the holes that I've created. And then I like to use a little bit of super glue just to kind of adhere it in really well. And once I put those two in, I kind of folded it back a little bit just against my little compendium guy. And then we're going to go ahead and I'm going to curl up my wire. And if you need to trim it, do so. I kind of trimmed them down quite a bit. And then I went ahead and I started curling up my ends. Now, if you find that even when you curl it up, you're like, okay, that's a little big, I'll even cut it off a little bit more. Get it down to where you really like it when you go to curl it. Once you have that, then you're good to go. And you can go ahead and add in your eyeball here pretty soon. I just wanted to make sure that I thought, okay, I don't want them too tall and I don't want them overwhelming everything. So again, just curl them up on the sides. Once you have that, then you're going to take the other two wires I have laying here and we'll put those in the top. And again, we'll go ahead and curl it up as well. Now that I've got my wires completely curled up, I'm going to bring in my super glue, and with those other three eyeballs, notice the little ridge here on the side. Remember when I made those other eyeballs before they were baked, I placed them in between two wires so that they would be able to fit really nice and snugly like right here. Now, the trick of course is getting that super glue on there and getting it on there where it's not going to come off in your hands. But once you have it on, he's good to go. Okay, so my little second eyeball creature is so much easier. I used a tablespoon, so set of teaspoons, go get them. Whether it's out of your kitchen or whatever, and get some tinfoil, and I'm using the tablespoon here, and I'm just creating a little half ball. Once I have that, I'm taking some scrap clay, and I'm placing that right down over the top of that ball. Okay, now that I've got that little half ball covered and I've kind of gotten it all to the point where I really like it, we're going to go ahead and flatten out some more of this scrap clay. And when I do, I'm going to make it, it's going to be flattened out again on number 4. I like that setting, what can I say? Anyways, I'm going to flatten it out on a number 4, and then I'm just going to cut some strips, just like I had done before for the compendium, and we're going to place that over the top of our little half ball. Now, once I get that done, I'm also going to add in some dots. I'm probably going to use my knitting needles to go ahead and make little indents in each of those dots. I'm going to add in all the little extra features I want on this second little creature, including my wire. And I want to set it up for my wire where I go ahead and I'm able to make that little eyeball again, so it'll go right on the top of this little creature. Then once I have that done, I'll go ahead and add in my paint. I'll start painting it up with the different colors I have. So from here, I'm just going to let you guys watch my hands talk through the rest of this little segment, and I'll join you on the other side. Okay, so now I'm bringing in the little creatures I've made so far. I'll just mention here, yes, I made the little life lights in each of their little eyeballs, wanted to add that in. But I'm placing down my main compendium and I'm bringing in the two other pieces. Now you'll notice here, I don't have, to me it didn't look quite right. And part of it was because there's so much black here, I was losing some of the details in my little floating eyeball aliens. So to kind of compensate for this, I decided we're going to go back in and I'm going to paint a little bit more. The problem was trying to figure out what kind of paint. And, you know, I had such a trouble time with that. I also brought in these other shapes. Now these are just regular, I took some scrap clay and I created these little teardrop forms, added in like a little top on part of that, and then another little ball on top of that, and you get these little forms. It was just something fun to add in because I just felt like I needed more in my picture piece. So I'm adding in a couple of these. I'm pointing my wire down, but I decide not to do that. I look at this and I'm like, oh no, I like the wire going up instead. It's just where am I going to place them all? So I had one pointing down, the other two pointing up, and I was really kind of contemplating. The nice thing about being able to do this with your picture is this way then you see how well it either is contrasting or not contrasting. And as you can tell right here, I'm taking these guys off here now, and I'm going to add in some more paint to this. I'm adding in that really nice purple amethyst, and this way then it really will define itself from that background piece. That's really what I was fighting against. Those black hills on my background, I needed to really make sure my little space aliens were different from that background. Okay, so now I've added more of that paint and I'm liking how that looks. I even added the silver, the metallic silver on the very bottom, and now I'm going to add in some rhinestones. And this is really going to add that little extra bling that I want to those little floating aliens. Okay, after using some of those little single rhinestones, I thought, what the heck? And I brought in some of my rhinestone chain. And part of this was because I didn't like the transition between some of my metallic colors. I really felt like my paint job was there. So, I fudged a little bit and decided why not use a little bit of rhinestone? It'll give a little flash, a little flare, and it'll kind of look like a row of lights going across. Okay, our little third eyeball alien was just a simple thing. Like I said, it was just a single kind of teardrop form that I made in scrap clay. This was already covered in black clay, and so I'm just going to go ahead and use a little bit of that metallic light purple, and we're going to do the bottom part of this where I'm just painting that up, and then I'll add in my green and my red metallic to kind of finish up the top part of it. Then I'll add in a little eyeball right on top. And these eyeballs have already been preformed and pre-made. I poked a little hole in them before I baked it. This way then they could sit right on top of that wire. Okay, so now I've finished up all my little aliens and let's put them in place. My background has not been baked yet, so I want to go ahead and place these little guys down and put them in where I really want them. And so I'm just kind of like floating them around, and you could really tell, especially on those floating eyeball aliens, the ones that are more decorative, it really made a big difference when I went ahead and I added in the extra paint. So keep that in mind when you're doing this. I'm bringing in my ball tool one more time. I'm going to go ahead and add that pockmarked, almost like crater-like feature like I have on my moon, and it's mimicking the moon by putting that down on the ground area. And I decided while I'm doing that, I thought I need to add something in to the little baby aliens, right? So I'm adding a little extra ground or crater surface or whatever you call it to the bottom of these little guys. And I'm gonna use my ball tools to mimic that little crater motion also in those little half moons that are attached in. Okay, so I'm going to add in one little extra feature to this, and that is my stars. So I'm just going ahead and creating some tiny little white balls. I'm placing them up in my little sky area, and I'm going to go ahead and use my ball tools and indent each of those. Okay, I've indented each of these and I'm going to bake my picture now. And now that it's baked, we're going to bring in my nice big long blade. And I'm just kind of quickly going under here and detaching this thing from the surface of my board. And once I do that and I go all the way around very carefully, very gently, and try to lift up where I can, but not the whole thing, I want to try and get it so it just gets undetached. Once I have it undetached, like I have here, I'm going to lift this off my board, take off any of the extra clay that kind of came off in the process, and then I'm going to flip this thing over, put a little bit of super glue down on the back side, just in a few areas, just so it can attach to the board, and then we're going to place this back down and put it back where I have my markings. Now you'll notice here my little guy, my compendium dude, he fell off. No problem, that happens sometimes. Just go ahead and attach him back in with a little bit of super glue. Okay, now that this is all put back in, I'm using a little bit of Comet. I'm just erasing the little graphite marks around on my picture. And I'm just cleaning up my board if I have any extra marks of any kind on there. So once you do that, you just take up those lines, and then I just kind of make sure I have a nice, where it's cleaned up really well with a little bit of water on the edge of my boards there. And then once I do that, I've now completed my picture of aliens on planet Eyeball. Now, I want to let you guys know, I tried to make up a little bit of a story to this thing. It will be in the description, but I would love to see what your particular story is to these little guys. So please leave me a comment and possibly a little story. I would love it. Okay, so this is my finished eyeball piece. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please like, subscribe, and leave me a comment. I'm always wondering what you're thinking. Otherwise, and always, I am sending out my biggest hugs to each of you, and I hope you have a fantastic day.